Hello again, everyone. I'm Dr. George Simon, and welcome to another edition of the new Character Matters program. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we have faced for several decades now, and that affects every aspect of our lives, especially our intimate relationships, all of our relationships, in fact. But I want to focus today on our more personal relationships and the role that a certain phenomenon plays in those relationships, namely the role of emotional dependency. Now, this is a difficult and sensitive topic to talk about these days, and the reasons for that are many. One reason is that there's a lot of misunderstanding about the term emotional dependence, and sometimes in the past, that term has been used inappropriately. It's been used to describe people who are not, in fact, dependent in any way, but have been coerced into some kind of false dependency. The word has also carried some negative connotations, implying certain inadequacies to folks that they don't really have. But especially in our times, and especially with respect to psychological matters pertaining to human relationships, it's important to speak with accuracy about certain phenomena, and emotional dependency is one of those. Too often I hear folks use the term codependent to describe either a person or a relationship. Even though the term may be used in a well-meaning way, and even though folks using the term believe that they are accurately describing a phenomenon, the word codependency actually has a meaning that comes out of early addiction research. Unfortunately, over the years, the term has become overly utilized to describe many other phenomena than what was originally intended. And the term is used these days many times to describe true emotional dependency. So I'm going to do my best in today's program to describe for you the difference between emotional dependency and true codependence, and also to discuss just a little bit about the implications of emotional dependence in relationships. Now, it may seem that I'm being a bit of a stickler here for the details of accurate diagnosis, so to speak, of a person's situation. But there's a reason for that. And that is because how I frame things, how I frame a situation, is going to largely affect how I try to intervene and how I try to help. And a big mistake that many helping professionals make is when they have the frame wrong in the first place. I can't tell you how many times I've counseled individuals who were told at one point or another that they were codependent in a relationship, that there was either a mutual or an independent relationship between them and their partner, when the actual reality was that there was only one emotionally dependent individual in the relationship, and there was another exploitative, abusive character in the relationship, willing to take advantage of that emotional dependency, willing to take advantage of the excessive conscientiousness of their partner, willing to exploit every single aspect of the more decent but vulnerable characteristics for their own personal gain. I can't say it enough. There's nothing in this kind of situation that even resembles codependency. And yet, many times the label is used and an approach to intervention follows that doesn't really address the dynamics of the situation. And this is why so many individuals these days end up reporting to me and to others that they have experienced what we call therapy-induced trauma. They went for help, not only didn't get it, but feel worse for the effort. Nobody seemed to really understand. Maybe somebody even got bamboozled. By then it was not only too late, but it was just another episode in the person's life where they reached out, tried to get their legs under them, and felt their legs being cut off. So these things are important, and that's why I talk about them. Without going into too much detail, let's talk just a little bit about the origins of the term codependence. In early addiction research, it became quite evident that the addictive substance in a true addict's life wielded a tremendous amount of control over that person's life. But similarly, others in the family system, especially a spouse, or those others in the family who are doing their best to pick up the pieces, to clean up all the messes, to fulfill all the responsibilities abandoned by the person whose life had become controlled by the substance and therefore was functioning irresponsibly. Their lives, these other folks in the family systems, were similarly controlled by the substance. In other words, the substance had everyone acting like they wouldn't otherwise act, everyone in the family system. They weren't free to do as they might otherwise do because the substance was exerting so much control. And in cleaning up the messes and assuming all the responsibilities and allowing the irresponsible party to continue being irresponsible, the other folks in the family system inadvertently, as we say, enabled the addicted party to remain irresponsible. They didn't have to become responsibly independent because others were cleaning up all the messes and taking care of things. But suffice it to say that the substance was exerting control over everyone's life, and therefore the term codependency. The co part of the word means together. One person, as well as another, as well as several others, all having their lives controlled by the same substance. That's true codependency. Codependence is not mutual dependence, it's not interdependence, and it's especially not emotional dependence. And it's important to understand the difference. Because in our day and time, the age of fairly widespread character dysfunction of one type or degree, in our day, emotional dependency is the bigger problem. Why? Because folks who haven't yet learned sufficiently to value themselves and haven't yet learned sufficiently to take care of themselves well enough are vulnerable to the exploiters out there, to those folks who would seize upon the opportunity to prey upon the vulnerabilities of someone else. Even the overly conscientious among us are vulnerable, especially perhaps the overly conscientious, because these are the individuals that the nefarious characters among us want to exploit and know they can exploit in a relationship if they successfully charm and seduce on the front end of a relationship and reveal their irresponsibility later. Over time, with commitment and with dedication, the other partner becomes, to some degree, dependent on their situation. And that's just the way the exploiter likes it. The exploiter will take advantage of anyone's over-conscientiousness. Now, the healthy character, the person who has learned to take care of themselves and has truly learned to properly value themselves, does not tolerate abuse in any form. When we're young, we're dependent in many ways, naturally. From our earliest days, when we can't take care of ourselves at all, we are in a one-down position, naturally. And if subjected to abuse or neglect, there's very little that we can do about it. But as adults who have learned how to properly take care of ourselves and not be over-reliant on someone to tend to our needs, it is no longer necessary to tolerate abuse, neglect, or exploitation. Unfortunately, some folks learn this way too late in an abusive or manipulative relationship. And what usually stands in the way is some degree of emotional dependency, a lack of confidence. One of the principal aims of maturing in character is to overcome any kind of emotional dependency, to become self-reliant, including self-reliant in the emotional arena, learning how to take good care of yourself, learning how to appropriately self-regulate, learning how to nurture yourself when you need nurturing, and not be overly dependent on others to do that for you. This makes you vulnerable, and especially in our character-disturbed times, this makes you particularly vulnerable to those who would abuse and exploit you. Folks who've learned to love themselves well, folks who know their worth deeply and know where that worth comes from deeply, have a different approach when it comes to relationships. They take time and care to adequately vet potential partners, and they know how to do that. And this couldn't be more important in our times. Now, that said, there are still some very skilled con artists out there. There are still some personalities that by their very nature know how to charm and seduce, who know how to appear one way on the front end of a relationship only to reveal themselves later. This is perhaps why my first book, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, that described these covert characters, became such an international bestseller. There are these individuals out there who know how to look good without being good, and know how to win you over. And you don't really know who they really are until you've got a lot invested in the relationship. And by then, it's a bit too late. So I'm not at all discounting that there are some expert and skilled impression managers out there. But it behooves us all, especially in this day and time, to learn how to properly love and care for ourselves. Because if we don't succeed in that task, we really can't properly love and care for the others in our life. Now, some disturbed characters are really good at fostering emotional dependency and dependency of all types. They're skilled at this. They may, for example, see in a person's over-conscientiousness a resource to exploit. They might see in someone's great capacity for empathy and caring another resource to exploit. So on the front end of a relationship, they may do or say all of the right things to help encourage a person to be overly reliant, not wanting the person to have a solid sense of self. For if the person did, and if the person came to value themselves well enough, and to value their capacities well enough, and to be sure enough of their talents and abilities, they might not be as willing to endure some of the things that the disturbed character either is beginning to do or has plans to do, or has already done to some extent. So in the end, perhaps nothing leads to more vulnerability in our character-disturbed time than any degree of emotional dependency. In our day and time, with character disturbance of one type or degree being so rampant, with so many individuals so poorly developed on the integrity scale, so immature in their moral character development, so impaired in their ability to truly care and to be a faithful partner, in these days, it's more important than ever to know how to properly value and take care of yourself. Anything less lays the groundwork for emotional dependency, which in any relationship invites the possibility for exploitation and abuse. We live in different times, character-impaired times. The only known antidote is healthy self-love, not narcissism, which by definition is the most unhealthy kind of self-adoration and adulation, but true, genuine self-appreciation, appreciation of one's genuine worth, and having developed the resources and the ability and the talents and the skills to appropriately care for oneself. In our times, this is more important than ever. Folks who have approached me for counsel in one way or another will often say to me that they believe that they are codependent. And I almost inevitably ask the question, along with whom? Along with who else? And upon what? Are you and this other person over-reliant? Generally speaking, they can't answer the question. Why? Because the issue is not really codependence. As we discuss things further, most of the time it becomes evident that the person hasn't yet claimed a proper sense of self, a healthy sense of self. They don't trust their ability. They don't trust their gut. They don't trust that they can care for themselves in a proper way, and they feel stuck within a relationship that is abusive and exploitative in many ways. They would chart a different course if they felt both strong enough and self-assured enough, but they don't. They haven't yet claimed enough true self-love, self-respect, self-confidence to remove themselves from a bad situation and place themselves in a better situation. And that becomes the work. Because in order to properly love anyone else, and in order to even discern the prospects for healthy love within a relationship, you have to first know your own worth, how to properly care for yourself, how to truly love yourself. Without that deep awareness, you can't possibly love another well, and you can't even discern the prospects that you're in a relationship with someone capable of similar love. And in our day and time, nothing could be more important. The need to properly vet character and know how to do that could never be greater. We live in character-disturbed times. There are so many among us who have so much growing to do in their moral character development that they just simply don't have the capacity to be faithful, truly loving partners of integrity. Unfortunately, most of the time we learn this far too late in a relationship. And also, unfortunately, all too many folks learn their own value and worth and their own capacities far too late, after they've already slipped into too much emotional dependency, over-relying on the person they thought was merely strong or more confident, but who turned out to be also the kind of person who would take advantage, who would not properly respect. I have a lot more to say about emotional dependency in all of my books, especially my most recent book, Essentials for the Journey, Embracing and Living the 10 Commandments of Character, Proven Principles for a Psychologically Healthy and Spiritually Rich Life. And I have an article just being released today on my blog at drgeorgesimon.com. I hope you'll avail yourself of it, and I hope you'll tune in again next time for another edition of the new Character Matters. Until then, I'm Dr. George Simon. Take care.